All right, hey guys, Sam back with you Tuesday, January 16th, or mid-morning here. I had another member interested in a look at ZRX to Bitcoin, and that's OX, O-X to Bitcoin. So here it is over here on the CoinGecko scale, 58, which I like to see. Good activity in the development community. We can see down here it's primarily traded against Bitcoin, and the bulk of it is on Binance here, so we see 33% of it. So thought we'd look at it on Binance. So let's have a look here. Now I've got a preliminary count on it here that I think works. Now, so if I pull back here, so let's go to a 4-hour here so you can see where I'm pulling that from. So here's where it hits Binance, and it's straight down until we get a good pivot that we can work from. So I've just wicked off that pivot low there to see so I can get a handle on where we are coming up from this count. So it looks like we may have a 1-2 that's already in. I'm going to go back to the 1 hour. It's a little tricky here. So you can see this we get this chop here is kind of as I will often tell you, you're to a large degree you're reverse engineering to get a handle on the count, so you know which pivots to work from. So this was the one that required a little checking here. So if I'm working from the length of what I propose is the 1 here to my 2, then I got to get at least 100% of the length of the 1 for this third, so that my third is at least longer than my first, right? So third doesn't always have to be the longest, just can't be the shortest. So that's a good qualifier to use here. So when we get just a little bit beyond the length of the 1 wave in price range here, then we have a good contender as a third. So if I take that off, does that play? So let me, if I can get it off there. Come here. Okay, so if we take that off, well, we come down here. This kind of gets my attention. Yes, we get a very slight overlap here, but essentially you've got structural resistance here offering some support. So it does overlap. So what does that mean? We've got a leading diagonal in our 1 wave, which was where we would expect to find it. Leading diagonal only found in a 1 wave or an A wave, as there's a fight for a new trend. So does that make sense? Well, if that's a 1, then I get a straight shot down for a 2. Well, let's check that. Now here's, this is not perfect. It's not exactly where I'd like to see it. Typically, we want to see a 2 come between the 50 and the 618, as deep as the 786, but 12% of them will just go as shallow as the 38. We get a little through the 38 and a spike through the Vegas wave. Look how the Vegas wave has supported this all the way. It's kind of interesting. So if that's a 1-2, so the point of going through that, right? So why do you care? Well, the point of that is if I've got a 1-2 in, and then clearly this is my impulsive third here, and we get subdivision within that as well. You can see a 1-2. Here's my 3. We come down for the 4. We finish up with a 5. So we've got everything we'd look for there. So that seems like a reasonable count. So let me do it this way. So if I've got a 1-2 in, so the first thing I'm going to do is wick off my wave 1 high. I want to pay attention to that because now I'm in a third wave, and I do not want to see. I don't want to see the wave 4 overlap the 1. That would invalidate my count, or the premise that I have here that this is a 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm going to check that. So I'm going to go from my wave 2 low up to my wave 3 high. Get out right on that. Okay, well, this is kind of interesting. So we come first right to the 50, get a little reaction, then it rolls over back down, but we hold the 618. Typically a fourth is between the 38 and the 50, but the fact that we go deeper here, it's not unreasonable. It doesn't invalidate the count. We hold the wave 1, and it looks like we've got a fairly clear, it's a little choppy up here, which is typical of a fourth. So it would appear to my eye that what we get here is we get an A wave, a B wave, and then down we go for the C right there. So let me pull the 4 out of that so we can at least see it. So that's a contender there. As an ABC, it makes sense. So that would imply that we're going up for a new high. So if I pull my 5th over here, look at that. So we can look at the algo target. It's right up above. So that would play. That's a reasonable target. So now we've had the reaction here. So we get the reaction. Here's the first retracement. So potentially what we have there is the 1-2 of the 5th. So this is setting up rather nicely here for a fresh long. So if the assumption being here that the low is in, here's our first 1. We're putting in the 2. We're going to go 3, 4, 5. Now let me change that color and the degree. So it makes sense. Okay, so does that play? Well, I'd like to see a little more subdivision in that too. So even if I went down to the 15-minute, which is as low as I suggest people go, so if I look at that, I'd like to see that. So let's measure that. So we know a two-wave, just as we did prior. We know a two-wave typically between the 50 and the 618. So we're getting, perhaps a little front run there off of the 50. We're not quite there, but that's where algos will start buying it. I don't have great subdivision in that second, so if you love this project, that's a reasonable place to be a buyer there. So if you want to look for a little more subdivision, particularly down here on the 15-minute, we'd prefer to see something along these lines. So something like that. So if I put the wave on it, the idea being we want to get some subdivision. So I have more confidence in it rather than just the first rip down. Typically, that's going to be the A wave. So do I get a reaction up here and, am I off to new highs, or am I coming up here for a push to get to that high that rolls over, bringing us down one more time? So here would be the ideal place to be a buyer on the second. Try and get it at ahead of the 618, but nothing says it must do that. But that would be where I'd have more confidence as a buyer here, trying to get long. And then, of course, we're looking for the third of the fifth, trying to get into that third of the fifth there. So that's one to be watching. I don't think that you need to be jumping on that right now at the first pullback to the 50. I'd love to see a little more subdivision there if we get that. Now, here's where you can get some more structural guidance here. So let's go back to the 1 hour. And let me open this back here so we can see it. So if I'm looking at that, I'm aware of this. I want to watch that. If I'm trying to micro tune my entry, I'd go down to the 15 minutes. So I'm going to take that off. So here's the pivot we're working from. The assumption is that the pivot is in. Well, does that make sense? Is there some market geometry to support that? So I would pull from my A up to my B. Well, it's two ways to look at that. You could say, well, that's pretty close. The other thought is, as Andrews would imply in his trading principle number 4, a failure to make the median line, right? So here's the corner pocket trade, right? So from the B wave, right? Because remember they go both ways. So from the corner pocket here, right, you've got an 80% probability of making the median line. Well, so that was a nice short. But a failure to make the median line, and I mean tap it, or get real darn close to it, which we don't quite do there. That implies strength in the market that we can't get there, and that would have been just perfect at the 618. So perhaps that's algos front running the 618. I mean, it's hard to say. But what we have here is it sets up. So the trading principle is that a failure to make the median line sets up a move equal to or greater than the last swing that failed to get there. So meaning that would imply that we have, so if we take this move here, and then I'm going to see if I can do this here. If I clone it and I turn it upside down, well, I guess that's not good. You're going to get the idea. So if we're going to go there, that would be equal to or greater than. So that would imply that if we get the 1, 2 down here, that we're setting up nicely. So we have technical confluence. The failure to get the median line sets up the move equal to or greater than the length of this swing, which would fit nicely with the Elliott count for a 1, 2 going into the third of the fifth, right? So here's our target here. So from an Elliott perspective, we can look at that and say, well, boy, that lines up rather nicely. So if I put the wave on that, you see what I'm doing here? So if we get a little more pullback here, a little more subdivision into a second to get more confidence with that, and we buy the retracement, then we have the trading median line trading principle lining up with us, and we have the potential third wave, and we measure that. Then we could take this just hypothetically as our potential roadmap. Well, here's the look at that. Look at that, how beautiful that is, right? That's just this technical precision. If we see it, right? So it's just a potential roadmap. So if we get the retrace on the 2, we're expecting this to be equal to or greater than the length of that move that didn't get there. Well, if we buy the 2 here, the highest probability zone for our third is right up here between the 1618 and the 175, right? Technical confluence. All of it lines up. Now, doesn't mean it has to happen. Just means you've got a beautiful risk-reward setting up there. So, again, this is the name of the game. So if we can get it there, if we can get an entry, if it's offered there. So if we do that, so we, this is trader's choice. Do you want to give it that much room, or do you want to operate on the assumption that the pivot's in? That's tricky. If you're operating on the assumption that this is your 1-2, well, then you wouldn't need to go below that low, because you would expect the 2 to go no deeper than 78.6% of the length of the 1. But it's a little trick, to put your stop right ahead of the 618. That's trader's choice, right? So one thought is you just put the stop under the 786, take the small loser if you need to, and then look to re-enter. If it does something else, maybe this is a 1, 2, 3, 4, and we come back down, and eventually, if I take that off, maybe eventually we get to the median line. So if I pull all that stuff off. So it could be this is just setting up for eventually a turn back to make the median line, because we know we had 80% probability from here to get to the median line. So it could very well be that we're going to come back down and tap it here. Then we'd be challenging the wave 1 high. So this is your alternate, right? So don't assume that you're right. So first question you have to ask yourself is, well, if I'm wrong, what else could be happening? Because if that's my B, I'm looking for 5 waves. Now, you can make the case that I've got a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but it's also possible that I'm just doing a retracement here. So if I pull that, well, there's the 38, there's the the negative 23.6, which would be my algo target. If I were to do that, I'm still not to the median line, implying that reaction up higher. If I'm going to go below that, I'm going to tap the median line down here. Well, now I got to reevaluate my entire count, because this can't be overlapped and stay as an impulsive wave. Then I have a diagonal followed by a diagonal, which, you could have it, but then you'd have a 1, 2, 1, 2. That doesn't look right. This looks like that's your 3. So the odds play is that this is going to stay your 3rd. You're not going to overlap this 1. So now it's just a question of trying to fine tune your entry. Are we going to do it here and this is our pivot? Or are we going down one more time to challenge the 618 with that as our pivot, working off of that? Up to the upper parallel, one more push down. That could give you a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for an ending diagonal, right? So you have all of those possibilities, which is why you can't be, just throw along in there and, well, I'm a holder on Ox. You can. That's not how I would trade it. I wouldn't suggest you trade it that way. I'd rather take the small loser and then reevaluate. I'll take the small loser, just a jab, not going to knock me out. Then I'll look to re-enter here, knowing that I've still got this upside target. So if I take the loss here and then I get it, right? See, this is what I keep telling you. That's why it's better to take the stop. If I get that, am I compensated? Am I well compensated? So look at the green here compared to the red. Right? Did I make back what I lost on the small stop and didn't have to worry about drawdown? You just take the stop. You can always get back in. Take the stop. The target hasn't changed. Yeah, now you've got a loser, but you've got plenty of opportunity here to make that back plus some. What do we got there? That's 10 to 1. Pull this down a little bit. Yeah, 10 to 1. So if I take the little loser here, no problem. Let's reevaluate. I still have a clear path to get me there, assuming that I don't overlap this. And I've got this nice median line structure here to offer me support. Right? That's how I'd approach it. Okay, guys, that's it for now.